بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight inshallah we're going to start with the chapter, we're going to do the chapter of Istinjaa. So the chapter is called Babul Istinjaa'i wa Adabi Qada'il Haja. The chapter of Istinjaa and the adab when answering the call of nature. The chapter of adab of Istinjaa and the adab when answering the call of nature. So the fuqaha mentioned this chapter after water and before wudhu for a reason. So they mention it after water because to answer the call of nature, to clean yourself after answering the call of nature, you have to use water that is pure, that is tahur, number one. So that's why it is after water. And why is it before wudu? Because of a couple of reasons. Number one, the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said to Miqdad radiyallahu anhu that when Miqdad radiyallahu anhu went to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam regarding a person who has a lot of madhi, that incontinence kind of madhi that comes out a lot, when Ali radiyallahu anhu said, "Kuntu rajulan madha'an," I am a man who has a lot of madhi coming out, which is that liquid that comes out when a person is sexually aroused. So he was the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So naturally he was shy to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about it. So he sent Miqdad radiyallahu anhu to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about it. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, "Ighsil dhakarak thumma tawadda." That wash your private part, wash the madhi and your private part, and thereafter perform wudu. Thereafter perform wudu. Because the fuqaha say, based on this hadith, the fuqaha say that, we'll mention it now, but the second reason, so that hadith means that wash this impurity and then perform wudu. So the cleaning of what comes out of the front and back private part comes before wudu, number one. Number two, if a person performed wudu first and then he did istinja and then he cleaned himself after answering the call of nature, so he answered the call of nature, then wudu, then went to clean himself, then there's a high chance he may touch his private parts. He may touch his front or back private part, and that would cause his wudu to break. So when we say back private part, we're not referring to like the buttocks, we're referring to the actual place where impurity comes out from. That's what it's called. So I mention it here because when we come to these masail, that's the part that is what the fuqaha are talking about. Even here, just now when we mention a masala, it's going to be connected to that place of the body. So the fuqaha say, we say the chapter of istinja and answering the call of nature. So istinja means to remove impurity of the body, but it's impurity that is specifically from the front or back private part, and it is on those private parts. That is istinja. So istinja means to remove the impurity from the front or back private part, and that impurity is impurity that comes from the back or front private part. So another impurity on the front or back private part, that way you don't apply the rules of istinja or istijmaar. That applies the rule of cleaning impurity in general. Also, another difference between that, so that is one difference between istinja when doing cleaning impurity of the front and back private part and impurity on the rest of the body. Another difference is that impurity on the rest of the body, you can remove it in any way. But on the private parts, there's specific methods and manner to clean the impurity of the private parts. Then the word istinja, before we go to that, in fact, the fuqaha say that wudu is not valid before istinja. It's not valid before istinja. That means they say that if some impurity came out of the back or front private part, it must be from the back or front private part, and the impurity is still on the front or back private part, right? Then here it must be cleaned before wudu. Therefore, impurity that's not from the front or back private part, if it is on the front or back private part, then here wudu is valid before cleaning it off. Right? And that also means that if there's impurity from the front or back private part, but it is on another body part, it's been cleaned, or it's not for it not to be on the front, back, or back private part, it has to be cleaned. So it's cleaned off there, but it's on your leg. Let's say your urine splashes. It splashed on your leg. You didn't clean that yet, and you went to perform wudu. We'd say wudu is valid. Wudu is valid. Then another thing is that istinja, well, we're going to explain what it is just now. But istinja, you do istinja from everything that comes out of the front or back private part. But everything impure. Because there are some pure things that come out of the front or back private parts. These things you don't need to clean, obviously, because they are clean. Like what? Like many semen or sperm. That it is pure. On the madhab it is pure. So you don't need to clean that, obviously. Another thing, they mention something that is impure, but it does not cause impurity. If a person had to specifically stool, but stool that is basically dry or hard, that's how the fuqaha say it, then that does not make the place dirty, does not make the place it came out from, that body part, it doesn't make it dirty. So there, since you don't have to clean or wipe or pour water for the sake of it, there's no impurity there. It didn't impurify the place. It didn't make the place impure. So that you do not need to clean. So you do not need to clean something pure. If a lady gave birth and there was no blood, because blood is impure, there was no blood on the baby, then she doesn't need to clean the private part. Another thing, pure, many. There's a few things that are pure. Many. So those things that are pure, you do not need to perform istinja from. And also wind. So if a person passes wind, then istinja is not needed. You do not perform istinja from that. In fact, Tabrani narrates a hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that whoever performs istinja after passing wind, he is not from us. Because the deen does not require such intricacies. So therefore, from those few things, you do not need to perform istinja or istijmaar. We're going to explain what they are now. Okay. Therefore, some people, before every wudu, they want to perform istinja, or they ask, do I need to just go and clean my front and back private part before wudu, or after passing wind, etc.? The answer is no. The answer is no. But if you have answered the call of nature, then you have to clean. You have to clean before you perform wudu. So the Shaykh says, Babul Istinja, the chapter of Istinja. So Istinja has two meanings. It has two meanings, a broader meaning and a more specific meaning. The broader meaning is to merely clean the front and or back private part. Merely cleaning it in whichever method that we're going to mention, that is called Istinja. That's the general meaning. The specific meaning is to clean the front or back private part with water. When water is used, it is called istinja. If something other than water is used, from what we're going to mention, so like stones or tissue paper, toilet paper, something like that, then that is called Istijmaar. But in the general sense, you can call Istijmaar Istinja as well. And to be specific, when you do not use water, you call it Istijmaar. Then the Shaykh says, and the adab of answering the call of nature. So the Shaykh says, وَيُسْتَحَبْ إِذَا دَخَلَ الْخَلَاءَ أَن يُقَدِّمَ رِجْلَهُ الْيُسْرَى. That it is mustahab, it is recommended for a person that when he enters the place to answer the call of nature, that he says, Bismillah, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khaba'ith. So he says that it is mustahab when a person enters the place of answering the call of nature. So the place of answering the call of nature, that is the toilet or the bathroom, if one is in a building. if one is in, not specifically a building, but it is an area that is basically enclosed. So even if it is a wall, there's like a wall, it's not closed at the top, but it's a wall, and you go behind the wall to answer the call of nature, this rule applies. It's khala. Number one. Also connected to khala, the fuqaha mentioned, like you have a bathroom that doesn't have a toilet in it. It's like a shower, it's just a bathroom. Also you can apply the following sunnah. And if you are not in a bathroom, or behind something enclosed, if you are not in a bathroom or place enclosed, and you are out in the open, then the fuqaha say that the place where you're going to go answer the call of nature, that place, your last step before just sitting or to do your thing, to the place where you want to answer the call of nature, that last step is going to be with your left foot. So before entering the bathroom, or what we say is the bathroom, or your last step if you're out in the open, it is sunnah that you enter with your left foot, or you make your last step your left foot. So the fuqaha say that you enter with your left foot to places that are generally dirty. They're generally dirty, like the bathroom. And places that are not, like the mosque or your home, places similar to that, you enter with your right foot. And therefore, so what we mentioned here is also similar to if you're praying out in the open, a masjid. If it's a building or like a building, the last step is you enter with your right foot. And if you're out in the open, then your last step before, just where you want to pray, you enter with your right foot. So when it comes to, we said entering with the left foot. So let's just mention an interesting mas'ala. At which point do you give preference to a right or left body part or a person? You entering somewhere, which point do you give the person preference? The person on the right, or how does it work? So the fuqaha say there's three situations. Number one, when it comes to the body of a person, things that have to do with cleanliness or good things, not dirt or removing impurity, etc., then in fact, there's two situations here. There's two situations when it comes to your body. When it comes to body parts, which part do you give preference when it comes to good things? Like putting on your clothes, putting on your shirt, putting on your shoes, etc. Beginning in wudhu, beginning in which body part? In ghusl. They say you begin with your right body part, so your right hand or right foot, like that. And if that is when you're going to use both. If you are going to use one, if the situation two, you're going to use one body part, then for things that are removing impurity, mostly when it has to do with dirtier things, removing impurity, things like that, then you use your left hand. In fact, the fuqaha also say that to touch a private part, whether your own or somebody else's, it is makruh to use your right hand. So that's important to know with this chapter. So it's makruh to use the right hand. You use your left hand unless there's a need. Like injury on your left hand, or a person doesn't have a left hand, etc. Then the qaida is that when there's a need, then the karaha goes. When there's a need, then the karaha goes. Then you can use your right hand. And for things other than dirt, then you use your right hand. So you use your right hand for greeting, for taking things, for giving things, etc. It's all the right hand. And so we mentioned going into places that are not dirty, you use your right foot. Places that are dirty, you use your left foot. So the way I phrase it now is broader. I mentioned in examples like the masjid, etc. Those are good places, you use your right foot. In places that are neutral, that are you entering into a random place, not specifically dirty or not specifically good, you also use your right foot. The second situation of what gives preference, the right or not the right, is where there are more than one person and all the people have a right to the thing. All the people have a right to the thing. Like who has the right, there's a few people in front of you, who has the right to speak first? Or like in the hadith, that is the dalil for this mas'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was brought milk. So he drank the milk, and on his right was a youngster. in some narrations. In other narrations, it says it was Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu who was a youngster. And on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's left was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave who the milk first? The elder on his left, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, or the youngster on his right side, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Here, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam gave preference to the right, because here we have to remember the Sahaba, they were short on food and drink and things like that. So here everyone had a right to drinking from this milk. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam began with the right. And he actually asked Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, can I give preference to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu? So Ibn Abbas said, I'd never give anyone preference to drink after you. I want to drink where you drank from. So therefore, everyone had a right to the thing. So you begin with the person on the right. The third situation is where you have more than one person and it's connected to respect. Like where you're entering somewhere and there's a few people. So do you begin with the person on the right? Because here you want to honor the person, let him enter first. Here the fuqaha say that here you give preference to the elder. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did in a few ahadith where he said kabbir, that the elder person should get preference. The elder person should get preference. So here it's more respect. When it's more respect connected to the thing, then you give the elder. The elder in what? The elder in age, the elder in ilm, in knowledge, the elder in his status, higher status person. So it's not specific to age. You can be younger in age, but more Allah has elevated you through knowledge or something similar to that. So you give that person preference. Or he's a hafiz of the Quran, or he knows more Quran than you. So out of respect for the Quran, you let that person go first. So that's an important, interesting mas'ala to keep in mind. So then the Shaykh says, so when you enter with your left foot, then you say Bismillah. That's the hadith of Ali radiallahu anhu, that what conceals the awrah of men from the jinn is when a person enters the bathroom, the other place of answering the call of nature, he says Bismillah. Then he says, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khada'ith. Then the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu in Bukhari and Muslim, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he entered the bathroom, he used to say, some narrations say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khada'ith, and others say, a'udhu billahi min al-khubuthi wal-khada'ith. So you can say either. And also, some of the muhaddithin say that you say khubuthi wal khaba'ith, and others say that it's pronounced khubuthi. So a dhamma on the ba or a sukoon on the ba. And some of them say that khubuthi is evil. So you say I seek refuge in Allah from khubth. So some say khubth is evil, and then khaba'ith is like evil souls. So you're seeking refuge from evil souls and all evil things. And then some say that khubuthi means male shayateen and khaba'ith female shayateen. So you're seeking refuge from all of those things by saying this dua when you enter the bathroom. Then the Shaykh says, وَإِذَا خَرَجَ مِنْهُ قُدِّمَ الْيُمْنَى. And then when you exit, so when you exit places that you entered with the left foot, you exit with the right. And those places where it's recommended to enter with the right foot, then you exit with the left. So, and you say غفرانك, you say, oh Allah, I seek your forgiveness, غفرانك, and that's the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. And then you say, Allahumma alhamdulillah alladhi adhaba anni al-adha wa afani. You then praise Allah for removing from you that discomfort or that impurity which was inside of your body, that you relieved yourself now. That's the hadith of Anas radiallahu anhu. And just to touch on one thing there, some of the ulama say one of the reasons that you say ghufranak, one of the reasons why you seek Allah's forgiveness when you come out of the bathroom, is that you realize that your body has now released things that basically could weigh you down or cause you discomfort. So, and you're not in control of that. That is from Allah's blessing. So you realize that you fall short in your thankfulness to Allah. So therefore you say, oh Allah, I seek your forgiveness. You say, oh Allah, I seek your forgiveness. Then the next mas'ala, the Shaykh says, وَيَعْتَمِدْ فِي جُلُوسِهِ عَلَى رِجْلِ الْيُسْرَى وَيَنْصِبِ الْيُمْنَى. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, so the Shaykh says that when you sit down to answer the call of nature, then here there's a method of doing so. And this is the hadith of Suraq ibn Malik radiallahu anhu, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught them that when they answer the call of nature, they should sit in this manner that the Shaykh is going to explain. So to break down what the Shaykh said, firstly, وَيَعْتَمِدْ فِي جُلُوسِهِ, when a person sits down to answer the call of nature, then he should sit like this. So when he sits down, so let's speak on that mas'ala first. What's the ruling on performing or answering the call of nature standing? Because the Shaykh says when you sit down. So what about standing? So standing, the fuqaha say that if two things are found, then it is permissible without karaha to answer the call of nature standing. And number one, that if a person is sure that his awrah will be concealed, no one will see his awrah, it will be covered, no one will see his awrah basically. That's what it means. It doesn't mean it is concealed from no one, but it means no one will see his awrah if he stands and answers the call of nature. Number one. Number two, he is pretty sure that no impurity would splash back on him. No impurity would splash back on him. So he's sure that no one will see his awrah will not be seen, and no impurity will splash or fall back on him. Then in this case, a person can answer the call of nature standing without a need, and it's not makruh, and it doesn't need to be that there be a need before you answer the call of nature standing. Okay? Number one. Number two, the Shaykh says when you sit and answer the call of nature. So this method is more so for sitting on the floor. If you're answering the call of nature while sitting on the floor, not on Western toilets where you sit on a seat, So therefore, if you were to answer the call of nature where you're basically on the floor, then here, the person, then how does he sit? He sits like in the following manner. So what he does here is that يَعْتَمِدْ عَلَى رِجْلِهِ الْيُسْرَى. So a person basically sits in a manner where he puts his weight on his left foot. He puts his weight on his left foot, and his right foot is where he is basically like on a tippy toe, like how a man would sit in salah, like how a man puts his right foot in salah, raising his foot and his toes facing towards the qibla, like if a person were to stand on his tippy toes. So if you were to do that, then you put your right foot, it's basically slanted, and then a person puts his weight on his left leg, then in that manner a person would basically be slanted to his left. He'd be slanted to his left, and his weight would be to his left almost. So they say that is the manner that a person sits when he answers the call of nature. That if he does that, then they say based on what they knew in the past, that makes it easier for whatever's inside to come out, because a person is basically inclined to the left, so whatever is inside of him can come out in an easier manner. So basically the underneath of his left foot, it will be flat on the floor. And his right foot will be tilted. His right foot will be tilted up so that he can be inclined and putting his weight on his left. So that's how the sitting would be. If he sits on the floor. Then the next mas'ala, the Shaykh says, وَيَسْتَتِرُ بِحَائِطٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهِ. So the next mas'ala, the Shaykh says that a person conceals himself with a wall or something other than a wall. So he says, وَيَسْتَتِرُ. A person basically covers and conceals. Let's do it like that. Let's say it like that. Covers and conceals himself. وَيُبْعِدُ إِنْ كَانَ فِي الْفَضَاءِ. The Shaykh says, and he goes further away from people if he is out in the open. So we want to get, the Shaykh is pointing out two things: to cover and to conceal. Conceal oneself and cover the body, certain parts of the body, mainly the awrah. So we say when a person answers the call of nature, if he's out in the open, then he goes further away. That's what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did. The hadith of Jabir radiyallahu anhu. When he answered the call of nature in the open, he went further away. Because what you want is that you want to conceal yourself from people. When you answer the call of nature, for a couple of reasons. Number one, to cover your awrah, so that no one sees your awrah. If you have no way to cover it, then if you are far away, then nobody will see your awrah. Nobody will see your awrah, number one. And number two, you want to be away from people so that it's not heard or smelled what comes out of you. So you want to be away from people for that reason, and also mainly the awrah, mainly to cover the awrah. Therefore, we said mainly it's the awrah. So therefore, when it comes to the awrah, we speak of two awrah, not two awrah, but two types of covering. Number one, the fuqaha call it asafil. They say the lower body of a person. That basically is the awrah. Basically is the awrah. That it's wajib to cover your awrah from people who it's not permissible for them to see your awrah. To see your awrah. So if you're with people who it's not permissible for them to see your awrah, then it's obligatory on you to cover your awrah. To cover your awrah. So therefore, obviously with clothing you won't be able to, you're lifting your clothing, you're removing your clothing to answer the call of nature. That's why the Shaykh says that with a wall, any barrier that you use to cover yourself, your awrah, that's enough. That's enough. Any barrier, any height, as long as it covers yourself. And for the rest of your body, that's mustahab, to cover the rest of yourself. So if you can do that, that's great. If not, then your main thing is your awrah. That should be covered from people who it's not permissible for them to see your awrah. Therefore, if you're with somebody who is permissible for them to see your awrah, like your wife, then it's not obligatory on you to cover yourself, because to cover your awrah is wajib. The rest is mustahab. The rest is mustahab. So then in a case like that, when you're with such a person, then it's not obligatory for you to cover your awrah. So then it's permissible for you to answer the call of nature in front of them. It is permissible. Because we said the main reason is the awrah. The other reason, that's down to a person. Number one. Number two, if a person is not able to, there's nothing to cover themselves. There's nothing to form a barrier to cover themselves, and there's somebody around who could see the awrah, then that person turns around. That person turns around so that they don't look. Basically, they ensure that they don't look. Then a person answers the call of nature, that's fine. So if he's out in the open and then he goes further away to answer the call of nature. If he is in a building or somewhere, he goes to the bathroom or there's some barrier, then it does the job. If he's not able to do either, then the other person who it's not permissible for that person to see him, that person turns or looks away. Then that will be permissible for a person to answer the call of nature in that manner. Then the Shaykh says, ولا يحل له أن يقضي حاجته في طريق أو محل جلوس للناس أو تحت الأشجار المثمرة أو في محل يؤذي به الناس. So the Shaykh says that ولا يحل, that it's not halal. So in phrasing it like that, he's basically putting emphasis on this aspect that we're going to mention of it being haram. It's completely haram for a person to, we're going to translate it, to answer the call of nature. So urine or stool in a path, في طريق, in a path, or in a place where people sit, or under trees that have something of benefit to people, or in any place that would harm people. Any place that would harm people. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, اتقوا اللاعنين. And in another riwayah, اتقوا اللعنين. That beware to be from those two cursed people. Who are they? Those who answer the call of nature on the path that people walk on, or in the shades where people under the shadows where people take shade in. And why are they the cursed people? Either because by doing that, people would curse them. Either by doing those things, answering the call of nature in those places, people would curse them, or by them doing those things, doing that which is the hadith mentioned, it will gain a person the curse of Allah. It will cause the person to get the curse of Allah. So, to break this down, basically, it is not permissible. It is haram for a person to answer the call of nature in any place where people take benefit from, public or private. Private, undoubtedly. If it's not their own, obviously they cannot. But in a public place, then they're not allowed. They're not allowed to answer the call of nature. It's haram to answer the call of nature in a place where people benefit from. So what kind of places? Any place that they take benefit from. The Shaykh mentions on a path. So the meaning of a path is a path that people actually still use. It's a path that people use. It's not a place that is a road or pathway or railway, but nobody uses this anymore. That pathway, it's not haram to answer the call of nature on it, right? Or mahal julusin linnas, or a place where people gather to sit, or a place where people gather to sit. So that can be in shades, under certain buildings or trees where people take shade, and they gather there to take shade in the summer, or they sit in the sun to get the warmth in the winter, or they gather there for picnics, whatever it may be, it's not permissible, it's haram to answer the call of nature in those areas. And that also connects to any place that would harm people, which would inconvenience people if a person answers the call of nature there. That's the last thing the Shaykh mentioned. The second last thing, أو تحت الأشجار المثمرة. Or if a person, it's also haram for a person to answer the call of nature underneath any tree where there is something of benefit to people. Something of benefit to people, whether edible or not. Whether edible or not. If they take benefit from the leaves of the tree, it's haram to answer the call of nature underneath that tree. If there's fruit, something edible, it's haram to answer the call of nature under that tree. Okay, so one more mas'ala connected to that, and that is, we say something beneficial to people that's on the tree. Is it haram at all times? The fuqaha say that it is not haram at all times. It is haram, let's say there's fruits on the plant, or on the tree. Fruits, leaves, whatever, but our example is, let's say for fruit. So when the fruit is still growing, it's far from being ripe and ready to be plucked. People are not going to take benefit from this tree, or from this fruit yet. So in that period, it is permissible to answer the call of nature under the tree. But when the fruit is ripe, along with just before it, now here it becomes haram, just before the fruit is ripe. If it happens that this leaves of a tree, people benefit from it all the time, then it's haram all the time. If at certain points people benefit from it, then it's haram at those points. And some of the reasons are because if a person wants to go and pluck the leaf or the fruit from the tree, but there's impurity there, there's a person answered the call of nature there, they'd not be able to do it anymore. Or if the fruit now fell from the tree and it fell into the impurity from a person answering the call of nature there, and nobody is going to eat that fruit anymore. You've basically, because of you answering the call of nature, you've destroyed of food and wealth. And other reasons are, if you answer the call of nature there and there's wind that blows it and then it goes onto the tree, people will not want to eat it. People will not want to eat it. So you are causing harm and inconvenience to people. You are causing harm and inconvenience to people. The last mas'ala, because before we come to the main last few masail of actually istinja and istijmar, the Shaykh says that it is haram for a person to face the front or back, to face the qibla while answering the call of nature with his front or his back. So it's not permissible for a person to have the qibla towards his back or to his front while he's answering the call of nature. So it is while he's answering the call of nature. Therefore, istijmar, when a person does istinja, then that is tabi', then they say it is not haram if you have the qibla to your front or back while you are doing istinja. But it is makruh to do istinja while facing, so not the back, while facing the qibla, But it is haram to answer the call of nature while facing the qibla with your front or your back. So the Shaykh, the way he phrases it, it indicates that in general, whether you're out in the open or in a building, it is haram to answer the call of nature facing the qibla. So that's what the Shaykh says. But most of the fuqaha, along with the main opinion of the madhab, the mashhur, is that this rule is specific to when one is out in the open. When one is out in the open. So in a building or where there's a barrier, then a person can face any direction. But if there is no barrier, then here he shouldn't face the qibla. And according to the Shaykh, whether there's a barrier or not, he should not face the qibla. The dalil for that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if one of you answers the call of nature, then do not face the qibla while answering the call of nature, with the front or the back, rather face in a different direction towards the qibla. The hadith of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. Therefore, so Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if you're facing the qibla, that you rather turn a little bit away from the qibla. So this turning away from the qibla, how? So let's say you have north, south, east and west, right? So each one is at 90 degrees. So then you have at 45 degrees, you have, let's say, northwest or northeast, etc. So if you were to turn just a little bit, almost like 45 degrees, that would be enough. That would be that now you are out of the qibla. You are out of the direction of the qibla. We're going to mention how exactly, what it means exactly to face the qibla. There's like 4 situations. If you are in the Masjid al-Haram, if you are in Mecca, where do you face? In the Masjid al-Haram, where do you face? In Mecca, where do you face? Outside of Mecca, where do you face? And there's a 4th one. It just connects to one of those 4. So, but here, in simple terms, if you are in the direction of the qibla, you turn a little bit, almost 45 degrees, except that should be enough. That should be enough. And the fuqaha say that if you are out in the open, then any barrier would suffice for you to not be facing the qibla. Any barrier, this is the Shaykh is saying barrier or not, but I'm mentioning on what most of the fuqaha, including the mashhur of the madhab, they say any barrier. If you're out in the open, meaning not in a building or not in an enclosed area, any barrier. So you have a car between you and the qibla, you have a tree between you and the qibla, you go near to something that can count as a barrier, then that would be enough. That would be enough to be a barrier. This mas'ala actually it's a bit of a mas'ala. The fuqaha say there's a bit of technicality to it, but that's in summary. Inshallah, we'll mention the technicality to it another time, inshallah. So now, the final last few masail is actually the main masail of, it's actually the explanation, the fiqh of how to clean oneself, how to do istinja or istijmar. So the Shaykh says, let's translate it first. When a person answers the call of nature, when a person has answered the call of nature, then he does istijmar with 3 stones or similar to stones that cleans the area. Then he does istinja with water, and he can do either of them. Either istinja or istijmar. And he should not do istijmar with bones or animal droppings, because Rasulullah ﷺ prohibited it. And also he should not answer the call of nature with anything that has value or a person should respect. Anything that has value or a person should respect, or something that is not appropriate to answer the call of nature, to clean oneself with after answering the call of nature. So that's the translation of what the Shaykh said. Let's first mention a few masail. There's a few masail here. Number 1, we're going to mention a mas'ala now that's very important. We mentioned what is istinja and we mentioned what is istijmar. So istinja firstly is to clean yourself to the level where the entire impurity is cleaned off. So your skin is as clean as it was before the impurity came on it. That's how the fuqaha phrase it. So the impurity is completely gone. And here for this, you do not need yaqeen and certainty that the place is clean. You need ghalabatul dhann. You need relative certainty. That the impurity is gone. You do not need to be 100% sure. Relative certainty is enough. As for istijmar, when cleaning yourself with toilet paper or stone, whatever it may be, that we're going to mention. So let's use a toilet paper. That's more common. If you use that, then here the fuqaha say that when you do istijmar, you are not actually removing the actual impurity. You're not removing it in totality. Something will remain. So you basically, they say, you're removing the hukmun najasa. You are removing basically most of the impurity, but there's some remainder. With water, it will clean the whole thing, and you have to clean the whole thing. With istijmar, after you clean it as you should, then there will be something remaining. And that remainder, it's overlooked. If you did istijmar properly, as we're going to mention, then that remainder is overlooked. That's why istijmar is a concession. It's a rukhsah from Allah Azza wa Jal. And therefore there's a few rules to it compared to normal removing impurity. And therefore you cannot do istijmar with something haram. We're going to mention it just now, with something haram. Let's mention it now anyway. You cannot use a toilet paper that is usurped or stolen, etc. Because the qaida is al-haram la yubih, that something haram doesn't make something permissible. What is it permissible here? The aspect of using the rukhsah. The aspect of using the rukhsah, the concession is not permissible if you use something haram. So istijmar, meaning you're not going to remove the impurity completely. You're going to remove it to the extent where most of it is gone. But for water, it's gone completely. It's gone completely. Now, when we say cleaning, when we say washing, we say with water, then let's go to mention a mas'ala that's going to come with us in wudhu, in ghusl, cleaning impurity everywhere. I'm mentioning it now. And that is there's 4 levels. There's 4 levels. This is a very important mas'ala, and if you know this mas'ala, it helps you understand many mas'ala. Number 1, the 4th level, the weakest level, that is masih. It is wiping. So that's where you take a wet hand. You take a wet hand, or you take water in your hands or your hand, and you let it, you pour it out. Then the remainder is a wet hand. That wet hand, you pass it over the area that you should wipe over. That is called masih. So in wudu, you don't need to have actual water in your hand. You have a wet hand, and then you pass it over your head. You pass it over your head. That is called masih. A higher level than masih is nadh, or rush, and that is to sprinkle water. So what happens here is that you take water and then you pour it over the impurity. You pour it over the impurity, but the water in this case, it does not need to be removed. You do not need to squeeze the water or do something to remove the water from the area to complete a washing, because we're going to mention washing just now. So here the water is left in the area, but the impurity is gone, it's clean. Like we're going to mention, for example, when cleaning the urine of a baby boy. When cleaning the urine of a baby boy, you need to do nadh, you need to sprinkle. So you just pour water over the area. The water is still there, it's not removed, it's still present in the clothing that the urine of the baby boy fell on. You do not need to squeeze the water out to complete a washing. That is called nadh. That is sufficient in a few cases. Number three, which is the second category in terms of rank, the higher, second highest, and that is ghusl. That is to wash. So when you wash, you pour water on the area, but the water should be removed. If it can be squeezed, the thing, it should be squeezed. If you can push it out, you push it out. That is called ghusl. That is called ghusl. So the water goes on your arm, it must drip off. If it just stayed on your arm, it's not a wash. It's not a wash, it's closer to wiping. So it must trickle, it must flow. It must flow. If it's not something that sucks the water in, then it must flow up or down. It must flow up or down. That's a wash. That's a wash. The 4th one is delk. So delk is where you wash, but you also use your hand or something similar to your hand to get the water to where it needs to go. So if you're doing wudu and water is not getting to certain parts of your skin, then you have to use your hand to do delk to make the water reach that place. Or if you are cleaning impurity and the water is not cleaning impurity off, then you have to do delk, either with your hand or some other thing that can actually, a stick or whatever, that can get the water to reach that place or to clean the impurity. So delk is a higher level. So most of the time ghusl works. But if ghusl is not doing the job, then you do delk. So when you do istinja, if the impurity is not going off, then you have to do delk. You have to do delk. But you do not need to do delk. If ghusl is enough. So if ghusl gets the impurity out, you do not need to do delk. So delk is when the ghusl doesn't work. It's not sufficient. When the ghusl is not being sufficient, then you have to do delk. So that's an important mas'ala to know. So let's go to what the Shaykh says and finish it off. So the Shaykh says, when a person has answered the call of nature. So when a person has completed answering the call of nature, if it is stool that he's relieved himself by, then here the fuqaha say that he just waits a little bit and he relaxes himself to ensure he's completely done answering the call of nature. And if it is urine that the person has urinated, then in this case they say he waits a little bit, a few moments, just to ensure that there's no remaining urine drops. So some of the fuqaha in Zad, we mentioned it, they mention a few methods to do, but the Shaykh doesn't say you do any of these methods. Basically you just wait, you ensure that all the drops are out. And many times for a male can feel that there's nothing remaining inside. And if there's something, they can basically kind of squeeze it out. They can get it out within themselves without using their hands or anything. They can just get the final drops out. And other times you can feel it's done. So when you feel it is done, then in this case, the Shaykh says, Istijmaar. A person does what? A person does Istijmaar. a person does istijmar. The Shaykh says you do istijmar. So now before that, let's just go to a few masail here. So the fuqaha say that you can do istijmar or istinja. You can do either. You do not need to use water even if it is available. So even if water is available, you can just suffice with istijmar. If you've done a proper istijmar, you can just suffice with it. If you were to do one of them, then they say istinja is better. So using water is better because water cleans the entire impurity. And istijmar does not clean it completely. There's some remains, but it's overlooked. Right. That's if you do one of them. In fact, some of the fuqaha say actually that istijmar is better. Because if you do istijmar, that means that you won't touch impurity. Because if you do istinja and the ghusl doesn't suffice, you need to do dalk. So that means you may touch impurity. So that's why some of them say istijmar is actually better. So that's if you do one of them. But the best is to do both. The best is to do istinja and istijmar. And when you do that, then you do istijmar first, completely, and then you do istinja. And if you were to switch them around, if you were to do istinja first, then istijmar, then because water cleaned everything. So then when you use tissue paper afterwards, toilet paper or something, then there's nothing left to clean. So there's no benefit in it. It's more drying the area. And if you do not do istinja completely, then it is makruh. Because then the istinja would not have cleaned the area. It would have made the area it would have spread the impurity. Because the water didn't clean it off, it just made it wet and spread it basically. So therefore it would be makruh to do istinja first, then istijmar if the istinja was not done properly. And if it was done properly, there's no use for istijmar. But they say best is to do istijmar. So then you almost do not need at all to touch impurity, because istijmar removed the impurity and then istinja just cleaned it off completely. And that is Aisha radiallahu anha. She told the sahabiyat to tell their husbands to do istijmar and then to do istinja, because that's what Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to do. So we mentioned those masail. So the Shaykh says, Istijmar bi thalathati ahjarin wa nahwiha. That a person does istijmar with three stones or similar to stones. So what is similar to stones? When they say istijmar, they say what you use for istijmar, it must be something mubah. It must be something permissible for a person to use. So it's not stolen or usurped or something like that. Thereafter, it must be pure. So you cannot clean yourself with something that is dirty itself. You cannot use something impure itself. You cannot use, let's say you have available a kind of a tanned skin of an animal that is impure, of an animal that is haram to eat and impure. So tanning it will not purify it. So then you cannot use that for istijmar. And number three, this thing that you use, it must be able to clean off the impurity. So it doesn't spread the impurity, it cleans off the impurity. Therefore they say if you were to use something that is quite smooth, like something like glass, similar to that smoothness of glass, or maybe paper, something like that, or something even that is very soft, similar in texture to like silk, or something that is wet, like a wet toilet paper, something that is wet, it will not clean off. It has to be dry. It has to have the ability to wipe off the impurity. It has to have the ability to wipe off the impurity. That is what you can use for istijmar. So those three things. It must be mubah, it must be tahir, and it must have the ability to clean the area. Must have the ability to clean the area. So for that, you have to wipe 3 times. Either with three separate stones or 3 separate toilet paper, or with one of those or 2 that have more than one side to it. So every time it is clean, every wipe it is clean, but it doesn't have to be a separate one. It doesn't have to be a separate toilet paper or separate stone or whatever you are using. Then the Shaykh says it must be 3. So that's because Rasulullah's hadith in Muslim where Salman radiallahu anhu says Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam prohibited us from using less than 3 wipes for istijmar. So therefore you must do 3. If it is clean before 3, you have to wipe for 3. And if it is not clean at 3, then you continue on until it is clean. Until it is clean. So how would you know it is clean? Basically, if you are using, let's say, toilet paper, then you wipe the area and there's no remnants on the area. It's completely clean. Then you'd know that Istijmaar is done. Istijmaar is done if you've done 3 wipes plus. So if you've done more than 3 wipes, they say it is sunnah to do an odd number of wipes. It is sunnah to do an odd number of wipes. So if you've done 5, if you've done 6, then you do 7. If you've done 8, you do 9. So like that. بِأَحْجَارٍ وَنَحْوِهَا تُنَقِّ الْمَحَلِ. So this Istijmaar, as we said, you must clean the area. You must clean the area. There must be no remnants of impurity. So that's when an Istijmaar is done. So what is the area? The area, the fuqaha say, for the front private part, for a male mainly, it is basically the tip of one's private part, and also you have the foreskin. The foreskin. That is called the mahal. If the impurity were to go beyond the mahal, there's a rule. That's why we are speaking of the mahal. So while the impurity is in the mahal, you can do Istijmaar. You can do Istijmaar. Once the impurity goes beyond the mahal, you have to use water to clean it. Once it goes beyond the area, you have to use water to clean it. Though Shaykh Taqiyuddin, on his qaida, which the Shaykh follows a lot, most of the time in the book, is when it goes beyond the mahal, now it takes the rule of removing impurity on the rest of the body. So you can remove it in any manner. But most of the fuqaha say you use water. You use water if it goes beyond the mahal. So while it is in the mahal, you can do Istijmaar. The moment it goes beyond, you have to use water. But if it goes beyond, the fuqaha say the area that is in, the impurity that is in the mahal, in the area, that you can do Istijmaar for, and the rest you do water. So you don't have to use water on the rest. You don't have to use water on the rest. Therefore, the fuqaha say that, in fact, they say if a person answers the call of nature and they were to stand up, do they have to use water thereafter? So they say the same principle, in fact. They say if the impurity went beyond the mahal, now they have to use water. If it didn't go beyond the mahal, they can do Istijmaar. Istijmaar is sufficient. Istijmaar is sufficient. In fact, some of them say that you actually do Istijmaar or Istinjaa in a different area to where you answer the call of nature. If you fear that if you were to do Istinjaa or Istijmaar in that area, it would cause impurity to come on you for some or other reason. So then they say you go to a different area. So if you were to stand up and you have impurity, if it went beyond the mahal, you have to use water. We're going to explain it on what most of the fuqaha say. And if it is still in the mahal, then you can do Istijmaar. Then we said for the front private part, and mainly for a man. Then for the back, the fuqaha say that the exact spot where impurity comes out from, along with safhatain. So safhatain, the fuqaha say that if a person were to stand, then on a person's buttock, where you stand, the part of the buttock that is not visible, that's how they phrase it in the books. Maybe they got it from some of the linguists when they say safha. Maybe they explain it like this, but I saw it in the books of some of the fuqaha. So that area, that if a person were to stand and the buttock is now, there's a part of the buttock that you cannot see. It is not exposed anymore. It basically meets with the other buttock. That is safha. So the safha and the exact area where the impurity comes out from, that is the mahal. So if the impurity comes out of the mahal, in fact, for the mahal, for the back, they say if it goes to half or beyond the safha, or that's Ibn Taymiyyah what he says that. But the madhab says if it goes what would generally be deemed beyond the normal area of impurity when doing stool, then that would now mean it's gone beyond the mahal. So there's kind of two aspects to the mahal. The mahal that would cause a person to now need to use water, and there's the mahal of wiping. So when you do Istijmaar, you have to wipe, and you wipe the mahal. So it's not just placing, you have to wipe. You have to wipe the mahal. So they say you wipe the whole mahal. In fact, some of the fuqaha say you just wipe the impurity. But other fuqaha say you have to wipe the entire mahal. So you begin with the area that is less impurity, which is generally the outer, more on the outer, and then you wipe inwards. They actually give a couple of details on how exactly to wipe. But we won't mention that because essentially they say however you wipe that achieves cleanliness, that is sufficient. But we mentioned that you have to wipe, and you have to wipe the entire mahal. And some of them say only the najasa. So if the najasa is not on the entire mahal, you do not need to wipe the mahal. You do not need to wipe the mahal. So therefore, when you wipe, you have to wipe the entire mahal for one wiping. And then you wipe the entire mahal again for a second one. So if you wiped half and then you took another piece of tissue and you wiped the other half, that's one wiping. So you have to wipe completely the mahal. And then when it is clean, then istijmar is done. Then the shaykh says, thereafter you do istinja. Thereafter you do istinja. Thereafter you do istinja with the water. And the shaykh says, then you can suffice with one of them. You can suffice with one of them. And we mentioned if you suffice with one of them, water is better. Water is better. In some situations, istijmar is better. Though mainly two situations. And that is, number one, for a person with waswasah. A person with waswasah. We say for a person with waswasah, istijmar is better. Istijmar is better. And also, sometimes people deem it obligatory to use water. So in those cases, you say to the person, you say to the people, do istijmar. So you're not leaving off the sunnah, but you're temporarily leaving it off for a bigger reason. For a bigger reason, because they are leaving off istijmar. So sometimes it is from the fiqh of the Sahaba, in fact, that they would actually leave off some sunnah because people were deeming it obligatory. They were deeming it obligatory. And that's how we understand where some of the Sahaba would say to people they should do istijmar only. Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas and Ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhuma, they used to tell people to do istijmar only. So it's for these reasons, for the second reason mainly, where people were deeming it obligatory to do istinja only with water. So we mentioned that mas'ala. And for istinja, we mentioned the aspect of dalk if needed. And for istinja, there's no specific amount of water, times to pour the water on one's private part. You can do it any amount of times until the area is clean, And the final mas'ala, we said, the shaykh said that you do not use animal droppings or bones. Animal droppings, whether animal droppings or bones are pure or impure. Because if they are pure, the bones and the droppings, they are the food of the jinn and what is equivalent to the animals of the jinn. It's the food for them. So we do not use it. It is not permissible to use those things for istijmar. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited, and he mentioned what I just mentioned. So you cannot use those things for istijmar. If a person used something haram for istijmar, one of these things that we mentioned that are deemed haram, then he can only use water after. If he used for istijmar something that is not haram, but it doesn't clean, he used, let's say, a cloth, and the cloth spread the najasa. So here, if it didn't go beyond the mahal, he can just do istijmar. It's not necessary that he uses water. But if he used something impure, then only water suffices. Only water suffices after it. So it's not something impure only. He used something impure or haram. He used one of these aspects that we said he cannot use, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited for istijmar, which is bones or animal droppings or something that needs to have respect. Then here you can only use water after. وَكَذَلِكَ كُلُّ مَا لَهُ حُرُمَةٌ, as well as everything that a person should respect in religion. But before we come to that mas'ala, two masail I want to mention, and then we finish off with that mas'ala. They came to mind now, and that is, the fuqaha say a person may have waswasah. And that is that he may answer the call of nature, specifically urine, and then he keeps thinking that drops are coming out after, and this is something that affects him. So here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's guidance for such a person is that if he did istinja, not istijmar, because istijmar does not clean the area, istinja cleans the area. If he did istinja, then here he can take some water and sprinkle his clothing, his underwear most likely, his underwear, he sprinkles it with water. The reason for that being that if he feels wetness, he can assume that the wetness is from his clothing, from what is sprinkled in his clothing, and not from urine, unless he is complete yaqeen, 100% sure that it is from him that urine drops came out or a drop came out, then he renews his wudhu. Otherwise, if he is not 100% sure, there's a slight doubt, then he deems the wetness from what is sprinkled on his clothing, on his underwear. Even Imam Ahmad was asked about a person putting a cloth, like a cotton, or like tissue paper, on his private part to try and prevent the drop coming. So he said, you don't do that. You do not need to do that. And he said, he was asked that what if a person found wetness on the tissue paper if he did it. So Imam Ahmed said, from one of his sons, I think Salih, who narrates this, he said that a person should not give attention to it unless he is 100% sure it is from him. Then he should renew his wudu. And in another narration from Imam Ahmed, he said, شَدَّدَ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ فَشَدَّدَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. He himself is being extra and causing himself difficulty by being so extra. And therefore Allah caused him difficulty. So a person should not go beyond the boundaries. And so what he should do is just sprinkle his underwear. The second last mas'ala of the dars, and that is, if a person did istijmar, and then a person sweated, and that because now there's moisture and impurity, because there's some remainder after istijmar. So then that sweat caused the impurity, that sweat that he sweated in those areas, and then it went onto his clothing. What would we say of that? Would it make his clothing impure? The fuqaha say that sweat and that impurity that came off the istijmar, where he sweated and then went onto his clothes, that is overlooked. That is overlooked. So that is overlooked. The final mas'ala, that it is haram it's not permissible to perform istijmar with something that a person should respect or that has value. And that would be things like gold and silver, things like money, and also books of sharia, books of fiqh, book of hadith. You cannot use those papers for istijmar. You cannot use it for istijmar. They also say books of subjects that are mubah. You do not use it for istijmar. You cannot use it for istijmar. The same thing they say, you're not allowed to use food for istijmar, food for humans, or food that animals eat. So you cannot use leaves that basically animals eat. That's the animals eat, unless there's so much of them that it's not going to affect. But otherwise, in general, you cannot use food for istijmar that people eat or animals will eat. And also you cannot use parts of an animal while it is attached to the animal. So you cannot use like a tail of an animal while it is attached to the animal. They also mention you cannot use like a fish for istijmar, things like that. It's all impermissible to use for istijmar. It's all impermissible to use for istijmar. If you did use those things, then it doesn't count, even if the area is clean, even if it seems clean, because you did istijmar with something not permissible. And we said al-muharram la yubih, that the haram thing doesn't make something permissible. And in this case, the usage of the concession, the rukhsa, it doesn't make it permissible. So here you have to use water. You have to use water afterwards. And with that, we've covered the masail connected to answering the call of nature. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to teach us that which benefit us and benefit us with that which He teaches us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.